Yes, well, come on now.
Don't touch me. Don't you touch me, Ralph. You don't know me that well. You haven't been in my life but 2 minutes, honey.
Your life is a shining example of the American working girl.
Can I hear it one time for the working girls?
Yeah! What's going on here?
Do you think exposing children to drag will result in more kids doing drag?
I think so, and I hope so, because it's the biggest confidence booster.
There's so many things that kids will love to experience.
It is a mockery of womanhood. This is what they think you are.
Shame on you! Shame on you! Shame, 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 shame on you!
Lucy, I want an explanation of what's going on here. How do you do? You're quite a looker yourself, Rosebud.
Bye, Mildred. Bye, Mildred. Bye, Mildred.
What do you say to the children whose parents wouldn't bring them to an event like this?
There is love. If you're not feeling it from your parents, someone loves you. We love you.
Our culture's truth deciders have decided that all of the recent talk about grooming is absurd, outrageous, offensive, bigoted.
There is love. If you're not feeling it from your parents, someone loves you. We love you.
They will tell you what is real and what isn't. All of the recent talk about grooming is absurd, outrageous, anti-gay fear-mongering, they say.
You're one of the youngest and first drag queen/kids, and I've heard young adults who look up to you for being who you are.
And I brought you a gift basket of some of my favorite.
All of the recent talk about grooming is absurd, outrageous.
What has this world come to? It's come to a world where drag kids actually exist.
And people do ketamine on a couch. And people do ketamine on a couch.
What do you say to the conservative parents that wouldn't bring their children to an event like this?
I don't think that there is any kind of issue with exposing children to this. I just think that drag is educational.
Do you think that exposing children to drag will lead children to do drag in the future in the long run?
Not if they don't want to do drag. I'm a gay man and I don't want to do drag.
It's not grooming. It's not grooming. We're not going to turn you into something else because you come and see this event.
Talk about grooming is absurd, outrageous.
They see themselves up there with those queens.
But now I feel like a fully realized, confident person because of drag. Yeah.
You people are the symptom of a dying society.
If you are here to protect children, let the children be themselves.
It's absurd, outrageous.
And you know it.
You're scaring children. Shut up. Shame on you. Shame on you. Shame on you. Shame on you. Shame on you.
A family can be made up in many different ways.
It's called SOGI, a curriculum that teaches public school students across Canada to celebrate the homosexual lifestyle and that gender is fluid.
All of the recent talk about grooming is absurd, outrageous, offensive, anti-gay fear-mongering.
Your gender is not dependent on what parts you were born with, but rather what you feel like in the moment. Drag queen story time. It's happening in Canada and America. Some dress like torn demons to read to young children.
So the child has the right to be protected from the parents when the parents behave badly.
And the little girl came home in tears because the teacher had told her that she was likely a boy in a girl's body.
Tonight, a transgender Indianapolis woman claims she was harassed by a worker at a red line construction site.
And a construction worker, young man, put on a drop cloth, kind of paraded himself, just kind of walking down the street like, something like this. Just don't even feel comfortable being on my street, walking, riding my bike. It would be wonderful for this worker to come to me and say, hey, sorry about that. That would be good enough for me.
It is a mockery of womanhood. This is what they think you are.
Greetings, everybody, and welcome. It is time for Armor of Truth Live. It's number 209 tonight. And here we are. So that little introduction there for you sets you up for where we are tonight. And here's a question for you. Did white supremacist Christian extremists shoot up and take down the power grid for 40,000 North Carolina residents? And if they did do it, did they do it because they were determined to stop a drag show at a theater in Southern Pines? Are Christians the new persona non grata in America? Are they? Is there really a concerted effort from media and social media to remove Christianity from relevance and ban Christians from the public square? Are Christians violent, hateful persecutors? Do Christian parents, or just parents in general, have any good reason to be worried about when the drag show comes to town? Is there any clear element of the movement, any clear goal to recruit and convert children? Well, it's an extremely sensitive issue, and we're taking a chance to bring it to you tonight and talk about it. So if you're a Christian, please pray for our message to be received in the love in which it is intended, and that the Lord would protect us so that we can remain on here on this platform and bring eternal truth. And stay tuned, because later on in the show tonight, we're going to talk about a Christian response to this kind of thing. So welcome to the show. It's Armor of Truth Live number 209. We've got a live chat going out there, so be good. And tonight, that's what we're going to get into. There was I think we need to show a clip before we start here. Yeah, here's something that just happened in Russia. Let's go to Russia.
This St. Petersburg apartment has become the site of a brave and blunt rebuke of Russia's anti-gay laws. This is a political act, no doubt about it, says Pyotr Voskresensky. The exhibits here, including the statue of two men embracing, are now considered gay propaganda, and as of today, they are illegal. Last week, Russia's lower parliament voted unanimously to extend Russia's laws around what it calls LGBTQ propaganda. They nicknamed the legislation the answer to Antony Blinken law because the U.S. Secretary of State criticized the move as a serious blow to freedom of expression. The United States of America have become the global center of sodomy, said the parliamentary chairman. Under Russia's new law, anyone deemed to be promoting same-sex relationships through speech or images can be fined thousands of dollars. Foreigners could end up in prison. For Alexander Hemlov, it's a personal blow. He advocates for LGBTQ priests. I worry that many will be forced to go underground, he said. In recent months, President Putin has repeatedly spoken about the country's traditional values. He even said to a group of women that the West doesn't know what the word mother means. They have dozens of different genders. I don't even understand what they call them.
Okay, so that is Russia. I don't know. It's pretty bad when, well, you got... who does Putin represent in this nation? Be really careful here on this platform. So there's that piece of news that's just come out. This was just passed in the last day or two. And then over the weekend in North Carolina, this happened.
But we begin with breaking news overnight. A troubling crime in North Carolina. Police say multiple power stations were shot up in an act of sabotage that knocked out power to thousands of homes in near freezing temperatures. The FBI is now involved. It happened in Moore County in the central part of the state. Mark Strassman is in North Carolina. Mark, good morning.
Good morning, Nate. With temperatures here in the 30s, tens of thousands of people are without power here in Moore County. Those houses have to be cold. Several dozen have found warmth in the shelter behind me. Officials here say that the outages began Saturday night after 2 power substations were intentionally targeted and damaged by gunfire. This was intentional. Crews found signs of vandalism. Multiple pieces of equipment were damaged. Repairs may go on for days. The Moore County Sheriff said authorities have not determined a motive, but that the attack was targeted. More than 33,000 individuals spent Sunday night in the dark and the cold, with temperatures last night dropping to 34 degrees. And Duke Energy officials warn that restoring power could take days, making life very challenging, possibly until Thursday. A state of emergency has been declared here. County schools will be closed today, and the FBI is now helping local and state officials trying to figure out who did this and why.
And that's the question: who did this and why? But there is no, there's no shortage of speculation on the interwebs, on the social media. 5 years ago, medical polling reported that 15,000 children between the ages of 6 and 17 were diagnosed with gender dysphoria. In 2021, just last year, that number tripled. It almost tripled to 42,000. Now, what Putin and his cohorts there were saying, is it true? Is what he says about us, is it true? Well, this happens when people or nation forget who sustains them. It's the result of the prevailing social imaginary. That's just sort of like a meta-narrative. It's the state of affairs that the masses are willing to tolerate, or that they're just too afraid to challenge, lest they be banned from the public square or fired from their jobs. Now, the masses have been coerced over time into accepting as progressive and healthy a depraved philosophy that now believes and militantly promotes that nature and the human body is simply raw material that we manipulate in order to find life's true meaning and purpose for ourselves. This is the polar opposite of the Christian worldview, the one that was previously established in the United States, which says, no, all of creation has a design, a given order, and a meaning, and that the purpose of God's creatures is to conform ourselves to his given design of creation. There, and only there, does humanity find true meaning and real peace. So the news and the media in general these days, social media for sure, is saturated with stories of children who identify as transgender or non-binary. But are they making a choice? Are they mature enough to make such a choice? Especially when at every stage along the process, every stage of the decision-making process, they have adults in important positions, authority figures who are there to encourage them to make a life-altering decision, all before they've even learned how to ride a bicycle in many cases. Teachers, counselors, therapists, celebrities, child actors, doctors, all the way up to the President of the United States, all encouraging the youngest and most vulnerable in our civilization to go ahead, change your name, change your clothes, change your personality, change your body, because that's progressive. That's what modern people do. And only an oppressive Christian would deny you such basic happiness. They're always recruiting new faces, new voices, new promoters, new doctors, new experts, and new gods, all devoted to making it as easy as possible for the youngest of our nation to either chemically or surgically alter their bodies in order to transition at whatever cost. This is a way bigger deal than disagreeing about pronouns. It's so much more dangerous than playing dress up. Something like this, as far as we can tell, has never happened in human history. The youngest among us are being encouraged, prodded, goaded, and lied to, in most cases, to receive puberty, chemical, hormone treatments, even irreversible mutilation of sexual organs, castrations, hysterectomies, mastectomies. What we're being strong-armed to believe is that this is all for the common good, that this is what true compassion looks like in the modern, progressive, scientifically advanced world. Major platforms are censoring channels like ours, accusing us of hate speech and the bullying that comes from the meta-modern mob has now been focused on the growing number of people who regret going through the transition. It's become clear to so many who were duped by the process and lied to by adults in their lives, adults that should have been protecting them. They've come to find out that changing their gender is, first of all, not even possible. But worse, it cannot solve the emotional or mental problems the way that they were told that it would. In fact, sadly, it far too often just makes the problems much, much worse. So I encourage you to search for this video. You can probably find it at The Blaze, or you can find it on this platform. You can find it on YouTube, so on the Glenn Beck channel. He interviews this young lady. Her name is Chloe Cole. And she exposes where this whole process starts and exactly why it is successful in ensnaring so many of our young people. For her, it was Instagram. Listen to this short clip.
Not really, no.
Okay, so before we get there, let's take it the next step. Did you initiate this and say, I'm non-binary, I think I'm in the wrong body? What happened? Who did you first tell, and what happened?
Yeah, so naturally after some time, after being exposed to stuff for a little bit, I started to wonder, like, what am I? Who am I attracted to? What's my sexuality? What's my identity? And I kind of like switched between labels like bisexual, pansexual, and then it went on to agender, bigender, non-binary, and then eventually I settled on maybe I'm just not a girl and I'm actually a boy. And I started to cut my hair shorter. I came out.
Do you think this would have happened?
This is the important part right here.
Without the media and the popularity of this?
No, not at all. I wouldn't even known what it was.
Okay.
But
And that's the scary part. You would have had no idea about any of this had it not been for the barrage online. For others, it was the glamorization of alternative lifestyles, the indoctrination to words like gender dysphoria, and a constant stream of influencers telling them that if they feel a little down today, it might just be because you were born in the wrong body. Remember, there are two basic worldviews in the world today. There are those that believe there's a design to the universe, a design to the world, and a design in nature, and that the human being's purpose is to conform himself to that design, and that's where peace, tranquility is found, happiness. There's another worldview out there today that says, no, nature is there, human body is there as raw material to be manipulated into whatever we feel like it should be so that we can find our purpose and happiness. So Chloe Cole says she became brainwashed by gender ideology at age 11, and at 13 she began medically transitioning to a boy. At 15 she had a double mastectomy. At 18, and she had to grieve the fact that she'll never be able to experience this sacred part of motherhood, which is to breastfeed her own child. That was taken from her by an opportunistic horde of false idols and lying spirits. Now she's on a mission to expose the darkness, as many others are, to reveal the lies in the transgender movement, to save children from the demonic seduction and the butchery of this false religion. So we should pray that God would turn the evil that's been done for good. Many, many other cases like this that you can find. Detransitioned teens explain why they regret changing genders. There's an article in the New York Post. In recent years, the number of children experiencing gender dysphoria in the West has skyrocketed. Exact figures, a little bit hard to come by, but between 2009 and 2019, children being referred for transitioning treatment in the United Kingdom, for example, increased 1,000% among biological males and 4,400% for girls. Meanwhile, the number of young people identifying as transgender in the U.S. has almost doubled since 2017. Historically, transitioning from male to female was vastly more common. Typically, those who went through this experiencing persistent gender dysphoria from a very young age. Recently, however, the status quo is reversed, and female to male transitions have become the overwhelming majority. I think that has anything to do with the body image that is projected through the media, entertainment. Dr. Lisa Littman, former professor of behavioral and social sciences at Brown University, coined the term rapid onset gender dysphoria to describe this subset of transgender youth, typically biological females who become suddenly dysphoric during or shortly after puberty. She believes that this may be due to adolescent girls' susceptibility to peer influence on social media. Helena Kirshner is a 23-year-old detransitioner from Cincinnati, Ohio, who was born a biological female. She said she first felt dysphoric at age 14, and she says Tumblr sites filled with transgender activist content spurred her transition. She said, quote, "I was going through a period where I was just really isolated at school, so I turned to the internet." Give you a shot of this one here. This one is, that's her there. In her real life, she said, Kirshner had a falling out with her friends at school. Online, however, she found a community that welcomed her. Right, you heard the drag queen on the at the opening of the show there. Whenever kids are having trouble with parents or at school, here's a community that's ready to accept you. Helena said, quote, "My dysphoria was definitely triggered by this online community. I never thought about my gender or had a problem with being a girl before going on Tumblr." Commenting on how the online trans community pressured her to change gender, she said, quote, there was a lot of negativity around, I want these ads to start playing. A lot of negativity around being a cis heterosexual, or that just means you're presenting as you are, being a cis heterosexual white girl. And I took those messages really, really personally, unquote. According to an online survey of detransitioners conducted by Dr. Lisa Littman last year, 40% said their gender dysphoria was caused by a mental health condition, and 62% felt medical professionals did not investigate whether trauma was a factor in their transition decisions. Quote, my dysphoria collided with my general depression issues, body image issues. I just came to the conclusion that I was born in the wrong body and that all my problems in life would be solved if I transitioned, said Helena. So the subject of detransitioning is often met with vitriol from the transgender activist community, which claims that stories like Chloe's and Helena's will be used to discredit the whole movement. It happens to adults as well. Here is a former Navy SEAL for 20 years who detransitioned. He says he was propagandized and pulled into a cult. This is former Navy SEAL Chris Beck. As I said, served for 20 years in special operations teams. He gained national attention for coming out as Kristen Beck in 2013 when he did an interview with CNN's Anderson Cooper. Just announced, this is fresh, this article was just out yesterday, just announced that he is detransitioning back to being a man after realizing that he was propagandized and, quote, used badly by a lot of people. He said he was told by a psychologist that he was transgender after a single 1-hour session. That same psychologist decided to write a book, or to convince Chris to write a book about his experience. He explained how the media used him to promote transgender ideology and warned about the dangers of children transitioning. He said, quote, you have the entire media. Everyone is converting all these kids. So this former Navy SEAL discussed speaking out against the transgender movement, about what can happen to you. Quote, their narrative is so sacred. As soon as you say anything, you're out. You're excommunicated. You're a Nazi. They ramp it up so fast. He also said there are a lot of complications with the surgeries, and that's the part they don't really talk about. He said that he takes, and the reason he's coming out now doing podcasts and interviews, he says he wants to take full responsibility for promoting this ideology, and stated that at the time he was naive. He explained that he is concerned that children are being talked into this. He said, I don't want this to continue. I don't want these kids to get hurt. So that sets us up for what we're kind of our premier story tonight, the one we're focused on, which is the power outage in Moore County, North Carolina. There you go. That was the clip played earlier. So they had to declare a state of emergency in North Carolina because of this. They don't like my ad blocker. Organizers say, now going back to before the incident this weekend where there was a drag show and the power went out at the time the drag show was about to start. Last week, or for months now, this drag show has been planned. Organizers said that leading up to this, even there were death threats. December 2nd, Fayetteville Observer, North Carolina, reporting from Southern Pines, says that organizers of a downtown Southern Pines drag show say they aren't backing down after receiving threats of violence from far-right activists. Now, this is where we have to start paying attention to narrative. What's even more important than the actual story here is the overall, the narrative, or let's just say the underlying assumptions. So this is the poster for the event, the Downtown Divas show that was planned for this past Saturday night at the Sunrise Theater, the fourth drag event hosted by Sandhills Pride. That's an organization that's there. And this is in central to eastern North Carolina, the Sandhills region. Executive Director Lauren Mather said it was the fourth drag event they've put on. She said, but never have the shows caused such a stir in sleepy Little Moore County. Yeah, so this is from the Sunrise Theater. Now, what's interesting is you can see the sort of the playbill here, and I looked at. It's not hard to find. You can see that where. Let's see. I'll get full screen. I can show you here, right in the middle, where it says must be 18 or over with ID. Okay, that's good. That's fair enough. But that wasn't there until recently, until they started getting a little pushback. And that seems to be what started people getting a little upset about this, because it was listed as things usually are at this theater. It was an all-ages event. It did say that minors must be accompanied by an adult, but that it was okay to bring children. So the organizer said, most of the time, if people don't want to see something, they don't buy a ticket, she said. But this time, the opposition went on a crusade. That's the term, on a crusade. It's a very specific term. To shut down the event by claiming drag performers and pedophiles with intentions of grooming children were going to be involved. So the main character involved here is a man known as Naomi Dix. This is the character that you see there, a drag artist based in Durham. Was the main host of the show. Naomi said right-wing conservatives mischaracterize queer artistry as sexual in nature and unfit for young people. She says they do this to serve, quote, the hidden agenda that they have, which is not wanting queer people to have events in general. So the claim is that it's right-wing conservatives mischaracterize queer artistry as sexual in nature. So that's why they say that it's unfit. So you saw the opening clip here tonight. It's sexual in nature. That's what it is. There's no way around that. I'm not going to enhance the picture on the screen there anymore, but you can see, right? It's clearly sexual in nature. So I was debating on whether to show other photos of the performers. I just don't. We've probably seen enough, I think. Like prior Sandhills Pride drag events, Downtown Divas performances were initially open to all ages, but in response to what they call the, quote, horrible accusations of making adult entertainment available to children, the minimum age for the Saturday event was changed to 18 plus. Sunrise Theater Executive Director Kevin Dietzel said, changing the age limit was done out of an abundance of caution for the safety of the audience and the performers. See there? You see the twist. The only reason that it was changed from an all-ages show to an 18-plus show is to protect the performers and the audience. That was, it wasn't to protect any children that might wander in, right? He said, quote, it adds to the stigma that people in the drag community already feel, Dietzel said. It adds fuel to the myth that LGBTQ plus community is something that people need to keep their kids away from. Southern Pines Christian School leaders claim the drag performances do target children. In a letter dated November 21, Calvary Christian School administrators urged parents to contact the town council, the theater and show sponsors, also, to ask for the event to be canceled. Something they have the right to do. In their letter, Calvary Christian School said, quote, the LGBTQ forces are coming to Southern Pines and they're after our children. The letter said in part. The rest of it said this is their target audience to peddle their abomination, unquote. So I guess the question is then, is there really any reason, do parents, Christian parents or not, have any reason to be nervous about this whole, when the circus comes to town, is there any reason to be nervous? Because what's being said is that there's not, that this is all made up by the Christians, or, So you can see the pictures are, So let's play here. I'm going to play for you just a clip of the Young Turks. If I can remember. I think it's, it's right here. Let's listen to the Young Turks for just a moment. Again, folks, what we're focused on here in the last few shows is there really a narrative to shut down, let's just say conservatives or folks who have a traditional Christian worldview or live by those values. Whether or not they're actually Christians or not, they live by those values. Is there a concerted effort to push these people out of the public square, to make them irrelevant? Let's listen to the Young Turks have to say here.
It never received such pushback. Drag shows in general have come under attack recently. Okay, I gotta pause and just address this for a second. Why are we allowing right-wingers to have us all live in fear?
No, she says something worse here.
When we want to engage in behavior, activities.
Why are we allowing them to say something when we want to engage in behaviors and activities that are, well, let me just let her speak.
When we want to be entertained in ways that they don't like. Like, why do they get a say?
Why do they get a say? Why do they get a say, indeed? And how much longer will they get a say? Is there any reason for anyone to be concerned about this movement? Now, it would be one thing if, it would be bad enough if it was going on and it was private. It's not private at all. Is there any reason for parents to be concerned that this community is in any way interested in influencing the youngest among us? Well, let's take a look at some examples. Here's one. Again, the question we're asking, what's the narrative here? Is their narrative coherent? Their narrative is, you're overreacting. This is not about kids. Is that true?
As we celebrate Pride and the progress we've made over these past years, there's still work to be done. So to those of you out there who are still working against equal rights, we have a message for you.
You think we're sinful? You fight against our rights. You say we all lead lives you can't respect. But you're just frightened. You think that we'll corrupt your kids if our agenda goes unchecked. Funny, just this once, you're correct. We'll convert your children. Happens bit by bit, quietly and subtly, and you will barely notice it. You can keep him from disco, warn about San Francisco, make him wear pleated pants, we don't care. We'll convert your children. We're coming for them. We're coming for your children.
Okay. So, is there any reason for anyone to be a little nervous when this comes to town? There's more. There are more examples. A non-binary elementary teacher says it's enjoyable to confuse students about gender identity. That's this story. There it is. Non-binary elementary teacher says it's enjoyable to confuse students about gender identity, wondering what they're going to do when I have a mustache and a skirt. I think there's a clip here. This is the Twitter post. Gosh, it's not showing up on there very well, is it? Yeah, so this teacher says, I believe this is a female who presents as a male. I'm not sure. Says, I'm not allowed to tell kids I'm trans or non-binary or that I'm not a girl. Okay, that's a boy. I showed up today with a new haircut and presenting much more masculine than usual. The kids are all confused and asking why I have a mustache, if I'm a girl, if I'm Mr. Banghart now. Why am I trying to look like a boy? I'm just ignoring the questions and redirecting so I don't get in trouble, though some of the reactions are hurtful. She says, I'm not mad. They're kids. I don't mean harm. I'm mostly just enjoying all the confusion about what I am, wondering what they're going to do when I have a mustache and a skirt. So, look... So it becomes mockery. At a certain point, it's mockery. They're mocking parents. So during a county, or it's parish, school board meeting, parents discussed concerns about this teacher's attire and behavior at school following the video, or a video posted by the teacher. In the video, Banghart expressed frustration regarding the school's restriction on talking to students about identifying as transgender or non-binary. Keith Hansen, Chief Technology Officer for the county, spoke in Banghart's, the teacher's, defense during the meeting. Now, this is interesting. So this, you're going to have someone from the community who's showing up to speak in favor. It says, quote, I have never spoken here as a citizen or parent of a student, but I am here today because this is important to me and my family, most importantly, to her. Hansen said, referring to the teacher, let everyone see on public record that there are good people here ready to defend other good people from vile, bigoted hate. Now, there's no question that there's vile and bigoted hate going on all sides. But specifically, where is this narrative pointed? Here's another. There's an article from the UK. Mermaids organization. I think some of you probably heard about this one before. As the Christian Post reported, the commission began assessing complaints about a group called Mermaids following a September report by the Daily Telegraph alleging that the group sends chest binders to girls as young as 13 without their parents' knowledge. What's a chest binder, right? That's what most of us would be asking. Well, and what's wrong with someone sending it to a child without the parents' knowledge, right? Well, girls trying to resemble boys often use chest binders to flatten their breasts. Some side effects of wearing a binder include breathing difficulties, breast tissue damage, and cracked ribs. Last month, Mermaids trustee Jacob Breslow resigned after it was discovered that he spoke at a 2011 event hosted in Baltimore, Maryland, by a United States-based organization. The organization provides support to people who are sexually attracted to children. According to the Times, the former trustee reportedly suggested that, quote, minor attracted persons are just misunderstood. That's the new term for pedophile, minor attracted person. The charity said it was unaware of Breslow's appearance at the conference until contacted by the Times. It's everywhere. Walmart has gone woke. They've gone more than woke. They're funneling millions to LGBT activist causes, drag shows for kids specifically. On November 30th, Heritage Foundation Research Associate Jillian Richards reported the following. In June 2021, the Walton Family Foundation launched the Arkansas LGBTQ Plus Advancement Fund, a $1 million fund that provides grants to nonprofit activist groups that promise to, quote, expand LGBT impact on communities. So that's not just in support, that's to expand the impact. Right, there's a difference there. One of these beneficiaries is the Equality Crew, who established in Arkansas a confidential affirming teacher and school staff database before the 2021-2022 school year. Now, that would be a database that would have names of people who are approved. Does that sound anything like, I don't know, North Korea? Approved citizens? Why would they do this, though? The stated reason, so that confused children would know who to connect with. They would know who the approved adults were to connect with, who would affirm their amorphous adolescent and teen sexual identities. Equality Crew has hosted events such as Kids Zone, featuring a drag story time for younger children. They hosted a Teen Zone, which is a grade school students where they were treated to a DJ, local band, and 2 drag shows. They also hosted something called the Transition Closet, a public library that provides gender-affirming clothing and accessories for transgender and non-binary youth in Arkansas. And they put on a teens-only dance party for those who had visited the closet. Now, the Equality Crew and their events were eventually shut down due to their own questionable behavior. But the Walton and Walmart Foundation are both also lead sponsors of Northwest Arkansas Equality, which is an activist nonprofit based in Fayetteville, Arkansas. The stated mission on the group's website: to provide programs, education, and advocacy to serve, connect, and empower the LGBTQ community. How do they achieve this goal? Well, they proudly claim to target kids with drag shows. This is just what they're, this is, we're not uncovering any esoteric things here. This is just what they're happy to tell you. They do drag children's story times also. They support that, featuring well-known drag queens. All of them men, of course. That's what a drag queen is. All of them are men, and all of them are men who, for some reason, have an unusual affinity for presenting themselves as hyper-stereotypical, hyper-sexualized adult entertainer women. And somehow, that's a good idea for children's story time. For some reason, in our country, there are men who like to hypersexualize themselves in a feminine manner, and they want children to watch them as they portray themselves as showgirls and, well, strippers. That's where we are, folks. There's no way to mince the words. That's where we are. In 2021, Arkansas passed the Save Adolescents from Experimentation Act. It's now law. What it does is it bans doctors from medically operating on minor children and teens for the purposes of so-called gender transition. Now, the Walton Foundation, Walmart Foundation, the Walton Family Foundation fought this legislation. And as one of the wealthiest families and foundations in the world, they are very busy in the advancement of this agenda that does, without question, target children. Now, no doubt, Walmart is an example of many extremely wealthy organizations that have knuckled under to the new philosophy of the new America. Now, Advocate, a gay activist publication, reported in 2016 that Walmart has made an imperfect but nonetheless remarkable turnaround on LGBT advocacy. They say you can chart the company's progress in the Human Rights Campaign's annual Corporate Equality Index. It's a real thing. Here's the website. What is that? What is the Human Rights Campaign's annual Corporate Equality Index? Well, it measures companies' inclusivity. In 2008, Walmart scored a 40. Now, I think, 2002 or whatever, they scored 14. In 2008, they scored 40. But in 2016, they scored 90. Well, now in 2022, they have a score of 100. They are fully approved by the agenda. Now, what this reminds us of is a topic that we're going to talk about here in an upcoming show, which is called ESG. This is, it stands for Environmental Social Governance. And what they do, well, this will give you an idea of what ESG is. This is how, if you're a corporation today, somehow or another, this has become the new ethics. You have to conform to these certain standards. Check this out.
Hey, I'm Brian. My pronouns are he, his, him. I understand you're looking for a small business loan, but you're having troubles with your ESG score.
I was denied.
What's your business?
I operate drilling equipment, oil and gas.
Uh-huh. The E in ESG is for environmental. You're in a dirty industry.
So I can't get no loan?
Well, let's take a look at your company's social policies. Tell me about your plan to create social justice.
Social justice.
Do your employees get paid time off for abortions? And tell me about your diversity, equity, and inclusion plan.
Well, I ain't got none of that. I'm a driller. I just hire good people to do the work.
Well, maybe there's one more thing we can check. Do you have any female co-owners?
No, just me.
Ooh, have you ever identified as a woman? Or even just non-binary? It could really help your score.
What?
Your loan is denied. Come back when you fix your ESG score.
Check that out, folks. ESGHurts.com. You can do a little homework on that if you like. ESGHurts.com. Some people have said that social credit system, that communist China has, they'll never get that to work here. Really? They just won't call it that. But it exists this way. Interesting, though. The Advocate publication said, after all, this is the same company, Walmart, that in 2007 announced it would no longer support LGBT organizations, citing a corporate mandate to remain neutral on controversial issues. Perhaps more dramatically, Walmart has caused other companies to follow suit. Among them, Apple, Nike, Salesforce, Yelp, PayPal, Disney, and Angie's List. They've caused these other companies to follow suit to be in support of the movement. So Walmart's transformation into an LGBT ally parallels America's new boardroom ethics. That's where we are. Note this proud and clear statement of their methods. Quote, most major companies are now deeply invested in diversity initiatives and good public relations in the age of hashtag activism. So pay attention to this, because what they're telling you is we're not here. We're not here to proclaim truth. We're not here for justice. We're here to force you, to compel you by hashtag activism. Goes on to say, continues to quote, the idea of a company fighting religious freedom bills, especially bills that don't threaten revenue, is fairly radical. Walmart is part of a wave of companies that use their considerable economic clout to force progressive change. To force progressive change. We might have something to say about that if maybe we just didn't shop at Walmart ever again. See, there are other answers than violence. Violence is not the solution. But we have other ways. There was in 2016, that's how Walmart was in 2016. Now, just 6 years later, Walmart is number one on the CEI, the Corporate Equality Index. They have a perfect score of 100. They're ahead of Amazon. Walmart is ahead of Amazon when it comes to inclusion. They're ahead of ExxonMobil and Apple as well. This is the new ethics. And why are they doing it? Not because there's a foundational truth, a real justice behind it. No, it's forced. They've just told you plainly to force these so-called ethics. So in addition to financially supporting the demise of the nation that made their financial success possible in the first place, talking about Walmart, and in addition to supporting drag shows for children, Walmart has also jumped on the bandwagon by providing $100 million in support to BLM, supporting agendas like critical race theory and identity politics. To put the cherry on top of this pie in the face of America, City Journal reported in October of 2021 that Walmart informed its employees that the United States is, quote, a white supremacy system, unquote. Okay, back to Southern Pines, back in to North Carolina for a minute. Before the event last week, a fundraiser organized on behalf of the Sunrise Theater had reached almost $10,000. No doubt it has passed $10,000 at this point. Mathers and Sandhills Pride has also received an influx of donations, which will be used to continue to be a resource for information and inspiration for the community, the LGBTQ community. So the Sandhills area isn't the only place where drag artists face backlash, says the article. Last month, a Texas state lawmaker introduced a bill that would criminally charge venues that allow transgender performers or drag performances and allow minors to attend any shows. Tennessee lawmaker, also introduced a bill that seeks to criminalize public drag performances. Right? You see, it's not saying they can't ever do it. It's just stop doing it in public. Right? Stop doing stripteases in public. Are they really asking for too much? Well, Naomi, the headlining performer from the show in Southern Pines, said this is not just affecting us locally, it's nationwide. Still, she said she will continue to fight for the right to create safe spaces for people of all ages through drag performances. She said the fight is never going to be over. We're going to continue to do this. It's exhausting, it's irritating, but we will get stronger. Still, she said, we will continue to fight for the right to create safe spaces for people of all ages through drag performances. She said this fight is never going to be over. This fight is never going to be over. Let's listen to this little speech, or part of a speech that Naomi made on the night of I assume this was from the night of the drag show. Possibly, anyway, but here's a quote.
I would like to say a couple of things. I understand that I, as a drag artist, can be a little bit threatening to people. I understand that my tiny waist. I understand that my good wig. I understand that my good makeup may threaten some people. But I would like to say that I also can understand that everyone has the right to protest, whether they are right or wrong. It is not, wait a minute, it is not our job to change them. It is, however, our job to educate them.
Okay, so our point here is there really a narrative? Is this really a religious type movement? Let's see what we got here.
And I will say this because I grew up Christian. I understand that in Matthew chapter 28 verses 19 and 20, honey, it says to go therefore and make disciples. And guess what? That's what I'm doing too.
So, Matthew 28, verses 19 to 20. Mr. Dix says that he is also going to be going therefore and making disciples. Let's read that whole passage. So this is Matthew chapter 28. Start at verse 16. But the 11 disciples proceeded to Galilee, to the mountain which Jesus had designated. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some were doubtful. And Jesus came up and spoke to them, saying, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go therefore and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I command you. And lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. So this is Lord Jesus Christ speaking. So this indicates that this is an authoritative command, not a suggestion. All authority, all nations, all things, all the days. This is God speaking. Jesus is here claiming equality with the Father. In fact, they are one. Because Jesus has this authority, we are therefore commanded to go. Not to sit and wait. We're commanded to go. It's His authority that sends us. It's His authority that guides us. And it's His authority that empowers us. His work and message would continue to the world through his disciples. And what is a disciple? Is this what a disciple looks like? As Naomi said, that's what I'm doing too. Well, Jesus did say this to some very imperfect disciples. Charles Spurgeon said, quote, "Who is to go out of that first band of disciples? Is it Peter, the rash and headstrong? Is it John, who sometimes wishes to call fire from heaven to destroy men? Is it Philip, with whom the Savior has been so long and yet he has not known him? Is it Thomas, who put his finger into the print of the nails? Or he would not believe him. Yet the Master says to them, go, you specifically, you all, go. All power is given to me. Therefore, you go. You are as good for my purpose as anybody else would be. There is no power in you, I know, but then all power is in me. Therefore, go ye." So this command is to make disciples, not just converts. The command is to make disciples, not just converts or supporters of a cause. The idea behind the word disciples means scholars, learners, students. Disciples are made. They're not born. Disciples are not spontaneously created at conversion. They're the product of a process that involves other believers. This making of disciples is the power of spreading Christianity, the gospel. So the aim of Jesus' disciples, therefore, is to make disciples of all men everywhere, without distinction. Right? Even this one can be a disciple of Christ, should the Lord change his heart. In the name, when Jesus says, in the name, go therefore and baptize them in the name. In the name literally means into the name, implying an entrance into some kind of allegiance. So the experience of God in these three persons is essential. It's the essential basis of discipleship. Christianity is distinctly Trinitarian. Our worship is Trinitarian. Our salvation is Trinitarian. Disciples, though, are made through teaching. The teaching is not with words only, but with the power of the always present Jesus. He'll be present with his people until the job of making disciples is done. That means until the end of the age. So the content of the teaching must be all things that I have commanded you, said Christ. So the followers of Jesus are responsible to present the whole counsel of God to those who are made his disciples, even the parts that are uncomfortable. Jesus sent his disciples with a mission to fulfill, but he did not send us alone. The promise of his constant presence is more than enough to strengthen and guide his disciples as they obeyed Jesus in making disciples of all the nations. D.A. Carson said, the promise of his presence is complete. D.A. Carson, a theologian, a linguist, he said, the English adverb there, always, renders an expression found in the New Testament only in this spot. Strictly means the whole of every day. Not just the horizon is in view, but each day as we live it. Not just the finish line, but every step between here and there. That's when Jesus is with us. And his presence, to be with us, that means privilege, because we work with a great king. 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 9. The Apostle Paul wrote, "For we are God's fellow workers. And since Jesus promised, 'I am with you always,' and we work together with him in all of our service." We definitely work for Jesus, but more than that, we work with Jesus. And his presence with us means protection, because we're never out of his sight or supervision. Cannot fall out of his hand. His presence means power, because as we fulfill this great command, we work in his name. His presence means peace, because it always reminds us that the church belongs to Jesus. It is his church, and it's his work. So then, how? Why? Why would we worry? How can we worry? One theologian said it this way: when Christ says, "I'll be with you," you may add whatever you like to that. I will be with you to protect you, to direct you, to comfort you, to carry on the work of grace in you, and in the end, to crown you with immortality and glory. All this and more is included in this precious promise, unquote. So as Christians, this is the message that we want to get through to all of these people. Their claim of salvation is a false one. Their claim of salvation has to do with, as we said earlier, this is poesis. It's the idea of using our bodies as raw material to transform it into whatever we think will make us happy. So as we showed earlier, North Carolina power substations were taken out by gunfire over the weekend. Moore County residents are under curfew as of Sunday night. So we saw that story earlier, and the story is that someone shot the place up. I think that's what's interesting about this story, is that it was even possible in the first place for someone to have access to our critical infrastructure that way. So this narrative really is serving a lot of purposes, let's just say. Right? We know. Look, Rules for Radicals says it plainly, and we know that those the regime that's in control right now, one of their main playbooks is Rules for Radicals, which says never let a crisis go to waste. Sometimes you have to create them, and then don't let them go to waste. But don't know what happened here exactly, but Sheriff Ronnie Fields, Moore County, said gunshots were fired at the substations, taking out the power in first in Carthage at about 7 p.m., and then shortly thereafter, where the second substation was attacked, spreading to the greater majority of the county. Now, I've lived in Moore County for a couple years, and it is widespread. It is literally in the middle of nowhere. The Uwharrie National Forest. It is a huge area. If you don't count Fayetteville, and I guess you have to count Fayetteville, but I mean, there's certain places you can be out there. You can be 100 miles from any kind of city. He said, unlike perhaps a storm where you can go in and reroute power somewhere else, there's just not an option in this case. A repair has to be complete. In many cases, some of that equipment will have to be replaced. So they're looking to as long as Thursday before this could be back up. Schools are out. The sheriff said, we faced something last night here in Moore County that we've never faced before. Now, the investigation into the incident, they're calling it vandalism. I think they're fairly sure now that it wasn't just an organic something. The power station didn't just blow up. It didn't just shut down on its own. And the FBI and the State Bureau of Investigation also are looking into it. Around the clock, they say. Jeff Brooks from Duke Energy said a full power restoration may not occur until Thursday. Now, the sheriff wouldn't go into the specifics about the investigation. He said No group has accepted responsibility for the attack, which is certainly targeted. He says again, quote, "We have no motive." When he was asked if the attack on the power grid was in response to a highly contested drag show in Southern Pines on Saturday, Field said that they had yet to find any connection to the show. And then, as reporters do today, asked, "Is it possible, though?" Field said, "I guess anything's possible, but we've not been able to tie anything back to the drag show," he said. So far, there is no reason at all to assume that this is any specific group. Any suspicion otherwise would just, it's just speculation. He said a motive for the attack has not been determined, but the damage will cost in the millions. All right. So as word of the outages spread, and then, over the weekend, as we saw the news and the following morning, rumors started going, connecting them to protests against the drag show that were present in Southern Pines on Saturday night. Now, look, there's not a lot of people that live out there. I think the drag show at the theater, there was going to be about 350 people there. This is not a huge event. Organizer of the drag show at Sunrise Theater said, as we quoted earlier, that they had some threats from far-right activists that had tried to shut it down. Now it is true that the Proud Boys have been in town they've been following this thing around and causing trouble there. They said they ramped up security, and we told you what the Christian school, what their comment was. Now, there was something a little bit weird about this. Emily Rainey, who the media says is an outspoken opponent of the drag show, who was a former Army captain who resigned her commission amid an investigation into her attendance at the something we can't say on this platform without really pushing it, which is the thing that happened in January of 2022, the first week surrounding the election at the White House. Yeah, she was... apparently, she's connected to that. At least that's what the media is saying. And it's let's see. Is this going to play ads if I hit it? Here we go.
Saturday evening, December the 3rd, shortly after 7 p.m., power outages began here in the Carthage area. Shortly thereafter, the outages would spread to the greater majority of central and southern Moore County. Upon the arrival of the power crews and our equipment, our deputies, along with all municipalities, police officers, state, SBI, different ones come out and assisted us throughout the night to provide security at all of our substations.
Do you believe this rises to the level of domestic terrorism?
I can't answer that. We're looking at all avenues. That's the reason I've got the professionals, the federal folks. They deal with the domestic terrorism more than locals. So they're on board and they're working with us to determine exactly who done this. Now I can say this individual that done this, it was targeted. It wasn't random.
Targeted, it's not random, says the good sheriff. Now what was interesting about this is the... show up here. Photograph of the sheriff with this one right here, Moore County Sheriff Ronnie Fields and Emily Grace Rainey at a Back the Red and White and Blue Festival in Southern Pines in October 2017. So this is October 2020, and you see them there unmasked. So you get an idea that this is based on what the media says about this female here. I don't know that we can trust what they're telling us anyway, but we do know is that there's a concerted effort to shame, disparage. But this was kind of, I don't know, this was at least, you don't want to be talking like this. So this is this lady here, Emily Rainey, who everyone's calling a local extremist, right? Extremist. If you want to marginalize somebody or associate them as the enemy, you call them an extremist today, right? Christian extremist, Christian white supremacist are big terms today. Anyway, says that posted this after the power had been taken down. Said the power is out in Moore County, and I know why. What was interesting, too, is that the sheriff went to visit her because of a post like that. And here's what she said. She said, they just came to my house. This is her, I guess her Facebook, I believe. They just came to my home. They just checked in. I welcomed them in my home. She said, sorry, they wasted their time. I told them that God works in mysterious ways and is responsible for the outage. She said, I used the opportunity to tell them about the immoral drag show and the blasphemies screamed by its supporters. She said, I told them God is chastising Moore County. Thanked them for coming. Wished them a good night. Yeah. So, on this platform, can't really say a whole lot about these things, but you can see that there's definitely a specific narrative going on here. The sheriff had said, sheriff also, when he was interviewed about it, said that he did go and check up on that post, the person who made that post. He knew who it was. He said in an interview that they had a word of prayer and he left. Now that really set the dumpster fire that is Twitter off, and it's so on social media here, especially on Twitter, this is where you'll see the claims that this is Christian nationalism. This is, stuff like this doesn't really help us out a whole lot when you come on right after that and start making claims like that. It's probably not the best idea. So it doesn't help us a lot. Really no need for doing that. But after all this, Naomi comes back with other comments. She said that despite the power outages, the stage still shined. When the lights went out, everyone held up their phones, their flashlights, and they all sang Halo by Beyonce. She said it was a beautiful moment. So it goes on. She said, quote, our community does have a lot of bad things that happen to us and drag artists, and they carry that pain. It didn't seem to dampen their spirits. Naomi said, this has never been about drag queens and children. This is about their direct hate of anyone who does not share their beliefs, she said. Interesting, isn't it? She said that this is about hate of anyone who doesn't share Christian beliefs. Well, let's look. What would it look like here if Christians were present here? What might it look like? Several area businesses and residents pitched in Sunday to help all residents. A group of Robbins residents, it's a town in the area, passed out hot dogs, chips, and water in Carthage. Casey Galloway said the idea came to her as she ate lunch at home after church. She didn't lose power, but she said she felt bad for those who did. She said, quote, God calls us to be the hands and feet, so that's what we do, she said. Now, that's what an actual Christian response would look and sound like. Her husband, John, manned the grill, the back of their pickup truck. He said the group had handed out at least 50 hot dogs in about 45 minutes, and we're planning to make another trip for more. Brooke Wilson said, it's just something we can do to show kindness. Ladies and gentlemen, that is what Christians do. The narrative that's being spun by the media, you can see here.
Yeah, like Governor Cooper said, it really is encouraging to see how people have been coming together in this really difficult situation. We stumbled upon the people out here in Carthage on Monroe Street.
So this is just the news report of what I just read you.
Chili, water, chips, lots of goodies, and just hot.
This is what Christians do. Now, the narrative that's being spun by the media today and repeated en masse by social media that Christians are hateful persecutors, that is a straw man fallacy. That is to say that those who have control over the general social narrative of the nation and the world have purposefully set up a false version of Christianity, a straw man or a hollow substitute, something that's easy to tear down, for the purpose of mitigating traditional Christian values in the nation, and ultimately they're doing it to remove the influence of the biblical Christian worldview from the public square altogether. Now, what are some other examples of this? Here's another example. Restaurant cancels Christian group's event just before start time because the staffers felt uncomfortable and unsafe. The Family Foundation, which advocates for policies based on biblical principles that enable families to flourish at the state and local levels, added that for weeks we had planned a gathering of supporters and interested people in a private room to fellowship and receive an update on our work. About an hour and a half before the event was to take place, one of the restaurant owners called our team to cancel the event. My friends, the church is at war. This is another presentation that we're going to have for you soon. The church is at war. What do we do? How do we respond? So we'll have that coming up for you soon. But make no mistake, the church is at war right now. Now, here's a new term for you. It's called rainbow capitalism. Now, check out this story. How white Christian supremacy infiltrated Pride Month. This is by Asata de la Cruz. This is from June 10th, from June of this year. De la Cruz says, we've now entered the month of June, the month of marketing strategies capitalizing on queer people in efforts to make us forget we started with a brick through a window and not a rainbow LGBTQ movement or LGBTQ Pride Month. They say as our queer movements continue to grow in strength, countless corporations seek to profit by using messages citing revolution, equality, boundless love values that we queers have fought tooth and nail to defend every day. This kind of co-optation easily dilutes the purpose of celebrating Pride Month. That houses the anniversary of the Stonewall riots, which is part of our queer liturgical calendar, into a palatable rainbow party. Liturgical calendar. Now, do you still question whether or not this movement is religious? They go on to say, Pride is at risk of being reduced to a false guise of diversity, acceptance, and inclusion that masks complicity in white Christian supremacy. Specifically, what they're talking about here is when someone like a corporation like Walmart takes part in Pride and they sell merchandise with Pride on it and whatever else they do. This person is pointing out, rightly so, that they're just capitalizing on a movement. They're just capitalizing on an opportunity. Or it's also possible that, as we saw earlier with the ESG, these are the new boardroom ethics. Which is it? Well, there's confusion. There's confusion for sure. They go on to say, once corporations determine there is a marginalized community, they can create the illusion that they support it while ultimately just taking their money. And that's precisely what they do. No better current example of this corporate trend is Walmart, of course. They say Walmart is a giving ally, right? This person says no. It's giving white Christian supremacy in sheep's clothing. And it says they say in this article, go ahead and check out what's on the Guardian, this article from the Guardian. Here's the article I found in this, how white Christian supremacy infiltrated Pride Month, where the writer of this article has worldview differences aside, this person has rightly identified what corporations are there to do. This from The Guardian, 25 corporations marking Pride donated over $10 million to anti-LGBTQ politicians, study says. So at the same time, corporations are supporting the Pride community, they're also funding their enemies. So what does that tell us about corporations? Much like the government, there's no such thing as red and blue. There's no such thing as conservative, progressive, Democrat, and Republican. They're all on the same team. And the team they're on is called Team Control. Whatever it takes. Whatever it takes to get control. So this 2020-21 article from The Guardian, it's on companies that have been celebrating Pride while donating major money to what they call white Christian supremacist causes. And this is called rainbow capitalism. They say that it promotes a false narrative that because they can see LGBTQ people represented in some stores and commercials, then all of a sudden we've reached an important marker of normalization and acceptance. Pride merchandising allows them to operate under the guise of being woke without actually using their power to create much needed change in our community. The article says if we're not careful, we will fall down the slippery slope of doing white Christian supremacy's work for them. We've truly not arrived at a plateau of equality. We have to push back on the notion that the commercial buying power of our allies is what will change our unjust structures. We need to be building political and social power as the Christian right ramps up their mobilization against us. Here's the last article, or the last paragraph. It says, the blood of resistance does continue to flow strongly in our community, so there are many who are not idly allowing this to continue. There are groups such as No Justice, No Pride that have halted pride parades in major cities in protest. In protest of white Christian supremacy's exploitation of our people. So what can you do? Soul Forcers, that's this website, it's called Soul Force. What can you do? They say Soul Forcers to at least reduce the impact of corporatization. Most importantly, as you prance in parades and twirl your rainbow flags, please do remember that you are completely worthy of a fulfilled life where you can express immense pride in exactly who you are. But also, please remember that pride was brought to you by drag queens and trans women of color throwing bricks. It was not brought to you by Walmart or T-Mobile. Well, it's hard to argue with that part of this person's argument, as confused as the worldview may be. One more article for you here. Look at this. This is coming from the bastion of truth, that is MSN. Interesting story, though. 1/3 of the FBI's domestic terrorism investigations relate to Well, we'll just use the term white Christian supremacy. That doesn't appear to be a buzzword here on this platform, but you can see what it says there, right? Who is the FBI investigating more than anyone else in this country? Well, this article also references the Moore County power outage and claims direct involvement by white Christian supremacists. The report mentions, it says, of 2,700 open cases where an individual or group of individuals has been designated domestic terrorist by the FBI, almost a third are these people over here, these people that are associated as white Christian supremacists or Christian white supremacists, or how are they calling them? White Christian supremacists. Interesting, huh? The Newsweek reporter adds, domestic terrorism investigations are being conducted in all 50 states and in all 56 FBI field offices, with more than double the number of investigators assigned to domestic terrorism work since January. The FBI uses 5 categories to describe violent extremism. Racially or ethnically motivated, including white supremacists, anti-government or anti-authority, including everyone from militias to Antifa, violent extremism associated with civil unrest, and also animal rights, environmental, violent extremists, and now abortion-related violent extremists. So there's a lot going on, folks, and these are interesting times, no doubt. What we have in our culture today is something known as a victimhood culture. Americans greatly overestimate, first of all, this point for you. Americans greatly overestimate the number of LGBT people that are in the United States. Whenever they're polled, whenever Gallup has polled Americans over the past 6 or 7 years, respondents to these Gallup polls have consistently estimated the LGBT population in America to be between 20 and 25%. That would be enormous if that were true. And it sure seems that the Pride lobby, we'll just say, and the media and the current government regime want that number to be true as soon as possible. But what is the number? How many actual people are there that affirm they're in some form, whether they're an L, a G, an L, a B, somebody on that spectrum? Nobody knows for sure what the real number is, but as far as those who are willing to respond to a poll and say that they are an L, a G, a B, a T, a Q, or whatever, the percentage of persons who actually identify, Americans who actually identify on that LGBTQ spectrum, is actually 4.5%. People think it's about 20 to 25. It's actually 4 to 4.5%. All available estimates of the actual gay and lesbian population in the United States are way lower than what the public estimates. And no polling or measurement procedure has ever produced any figures anywhere near what the public feels like it is. Nothing has ever been able to show that it's any more than 4 to 4.5%. So why the overestimations? Well, it's because the LGBTQ community are the most visible of any group, for sure. They get the most airtime. They see less persecution online and in the media. An annual report by GLAAD, an LGBT advocacy group, found that representation of LGBT people in primetime television is getting close to 10%. Now, that's double Gallup's estimate of what the actual percentage is in the population. So the so-called progressive worldview is not neutral. They're very religious and they evangelize hard. What they offer is an alternative salvation claim. That through political action, that through the exalting of mankind as raw material that's created in man's image, and through breaking down all barriers and limitations, we can experience heaven on earth with collective humanity as both Redeemer and the redeemed. And that ultimately, technology will be the Savior. Be specific, as Carl Teichert writes, he says, transhumanism is the philosophical, religious, and spiritual application of this movement. Now, to tear down all the boundaries, everything is allowed. Even minor attracted persons, right? This is not far-fetched, folks. Elizabeth Warren, last week with the passage of the next step in the Respect for Marriage Act, her quote was, "This is good, but it should be better," or something like that. We can do more. She said, "I won't be happy until we see 100% acceptance of any act. Of any act." That's a sitting congresswoman. Is that what she is? Anyway, that's what they want. They want any act to be allowed. Nothing's illegal. They're not going to stop until they get there. Biblical Christianity is a threat to human autonomy. It always has been. And the ecumenical movement for a new world religion and the movement for, to have full access to your children, all of it, it's part of a new world religion. Perhaps the term has been too sullied by liberal theologians and the media and the deconstructionist wave that we've seen in recent years. But the deconstruction of Christianity, the deconstruction of America, of America's institutions, deconstructionism is a movement in philosophy. It's a literary philosophy that started out in critical theory that questions traditional assumptions about certainty, identity, and truth, and questions certainty about reality itself. They say that words can only refer to other words, that statements about any text subvert their own meanings. This is how you get certain people in the Supreme Court who believe that the Constitution is just a living document to be interpreted however the interpreter sees it. Essentially, that they believe that reality is just a construct that's created by the observer, and it's filtered through his or her own feelings and experiences. So this is where the postmodern or the post-postmodern or the meta-modern mind gets the idea that gender or objective physical truth about the body is just a construct, that reality is malleable. Ultimately, the logical conclusion of this corruption leads one who is not anchored firmly to truth, objective reality, one who is not sanctified by truth, which is God's stable, unchanging, inerrant in what it communicates, and fully sufficient word, the Bible, Christianity, and the church. Well, they believe these things are just created in the mind. They're just thought forms. They're just ideas, things that can be changed and made to fit more comfortably into culture so that one is accepted and seen as righteous according to the culture and the culture's ever-changing standards. So in that sense, salvation changes over time. Now, we'll get to these moral cultures another time. Moral cultures are... There's sociology professors Bradley Campbell from UCLA and Jason Manning at West Virginia have written an article on this. We've covered this before on a show with Days of Noah. We talked about this. It's really interesting stuff. I think we could probably cover it right fast. So an honor culture is a culture where individuals have a greater sensitivity to slights. An honor culture. Honor cultures are, you think about when you're reading stories or about nations, ancient nations, mostly it's honor cultures, right? There's a sensitivity to slights and disagreement, even accidental slights demand a serious response, right? You don't want to be disrespected. Disagreement is shameful, and justice is personal. Think of the wild, wild west. That's an honor culture. You take matters into your own hands. Often it's violent vengeance. Appeals to authorities are shameful. It suggests that it's cowardly. It's cowardly, to use the police. Virtue in an honor culture means aggressively defending your reputation and being vigilant for anyone who may be a threat. Examples of honor cultures around the world and throughout history tend to have relatively high rates of violence, including distinctive forms like dueling. You see duels in an honor culture. Also, Islamic states, where you see the honor killing of women, like a woman who, according to those in charge, have shamed the family in some way. That's an honor culture. In fact, global estimates are that as many as 20,000 women a year are killed in honor cultures as a result of someone defending the reputation of the family or the community. Young Muslim women in the West now are becoming increasingly vulnerable to honor killings as well. All right, so next you have dignity cultures. Well, this is where individuals are more tolerant of slights and disagreement. This would be the traditional American model. Representative republic, democracy typically would be a dignity culture. People might be criticized for overreacting to slights. Actual violent assaults are handled reasonably through appeals to authorities. Taking the law into your own hands is itself a serious crime. And dignity culture emphasizes an inherent and inalienable moral worth that all people have. So this has been, up until recently, this has been the American way, where all human life has an inalienable, that means it can't be taken away and you can't give it away, has an inalienable moral worth, dignity. All people have it. Overreacting to an offense in a dignity culture suggests that you're not confident in your own worth, and you might be invested emotionally in the opinions of other people. In a dignity culture, virtue isn't being aggressive, but showing restraint, quietly self-assured. An example of a dignity culture would be the Christian worldview. It would be the teachings of Jesus Christ to love your enemy, to seek to be merciful to all people. But in 1970, sociologist Peter Berger called the concept of 1970, Peter Berger called the concept of honor obsolete. Goodness. Saying it had little resonance with modern people, that people no longer lived in mortal fear of having their honor damaged, that questioning someone's honor would result in a strange look rather than outrage, and duels to the death were gone, just a strange curiosity of the past. Times change, and perspectives do evolve, but the same tendencies of fallen humanity are still with us. Therefore, there is a relatively new phenomenon seen in modern life in the West, and that is victimhood culture. In victimhood cultures, individuals are easily offended with an overdependence on institutions. This has a marked effect on overall culture. Victim identities are seen as deserving of special care and deference. On the other hand, privileged are morally inferior and deserving of public, outright contempt. The victimhood culture always seems to spawn social conflicts, which in turn will produce an ever larger and more coercive government tasked with trying to suppress it. Campbell and Manning say, the two sociologists that wrote this paper, they say that in a victimhood culture, individuals and groups display a high sensitivity to slight. They have a tendency to handle conflicts through complaints to third parties, and they seek to cultivate an image of being victims who deserve special treatment and assistance. Now, the result of a society ceding over ever more power to state authorities to resolve their conflicts will be the destruction of liberalism and democracy. Liberalism in the classic sense. Victimhood culture is really another kind of honor culture. You could call it a shame culture. Dignity cultures are where actual tolerance can be expressed and enjoyed and are much more peaceful than honor cultures. So once again, we have dignity culture. That's where you would see objective morality. Yeah, here we go. Dignity culture. You would see objective morality, pleasing and serving God. That's what you would find in a dignity culture. Honor culture is subjective morality. Right? The idea is you have to appease man. Victimhood culture is worship of the self, where life is recreated in the image of man's desires. So this is what we're dealing with. And the reason this is important, because where we want to take you over the next days and weeks on this channel is to gain an understanding of what we're up against. And by the way, please, if you can, folks, support us and subscribe to our backup channel, True Normal TV, because, look, at any minute, this could all be gone, right? We're not trying to make that happen, but in the process of defending truth, eternal truth here, how do we do that without talking about the most important issues of our day? If we just come on here and avoid the most important issues of the day, how do we do cultural apologetics? What we want to do is learn how to, if you can, folks, please support us in what we're doing here, because we need your support. And the only way that this goes forward is through crowdfunding, is through support from those who participate, those who watch. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, the weapons of our warfare are let's get this one up here. I didn't have the Bible ready, so that'll slow me down. 2 Corinthians chapter 10, where Paul defends his ministry. Verse 3, he says, "For though we walk in the flesh, we're not waging war according to the flesh." Second Corinthians 10, there you go. There you go. "For though we walk in the flesh, we're not waging war according to the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not the flesh, but have divine power to destroy strongholds. Divine power to destroy strongholds. We're not warring in the flesh, my friends. This is why we don't do violence. We don't take out power grids. Those are not Christians. Because the reliance on carnal methods and the habit of carnal thinking is a stronghold itself. The desire for revenge against any group, that is a spiritual stronghold. It stubbornly sets down deep roots in your heart and in your mind, and it colors all of our actions and thinking. It's hard to let go of the thinking that values the things and the ways of this world, but God's power really can break down these strongholds. So when you see someone who takes it upon themselves, if that's what happened, to shoot up and shut down a power station or to do something violent and destructive like that, this is not Christians. This is not how Christians react. Theologian Adam Clarke said, in like manner, the doctrines of the Reformation, mighty through God, pulled down, demolished, and brought into captivity the whole Roman Catholic papal system. And instead of obedience to the Pope, the pretended substitute of God upon the earth, obedience to Christ as the sole almighty head of the church was established. And it continues to prevail today. Hallelujah. The Lord God omnipotent reigns. Verse 5, 2 Corinthians 10 says, we destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God and take every thought captive to obey Christ. So the battle against this carnal way of thinking and doing things, to overcome this, the carnal way of thinking, our thoughts must be made obedient to Christ. How do we do that? Romans chapter 12, verse 2. Be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. There's only one way for that to happen. That is submission of your heart, of your life to Christ. Now, no matter what anyone out there might tell you, any community, we're not helpless victims. Our thoughts don't just come and attack us. Right? We're not helpless. We're not helpless to our trauma. We're not helpless to whatever thoughts might come into our heads. They might happen, but we're not without a resource. A Christian sealed with the Holy Spirit can choose to stop his thoughts and bring every thought into captivity to obedience to Christ. That's what we see there. Verse 5, we destroy arguments. All right, we defend the truth. We destroy arguments. We take down all the lofty opinions that are raised against the knowledge of God, like we heard in all of these stories tonight. And we take every thought captive to obey Christ. Thoughts of lust, anger, fear, greed, bitterness, evil, all of them must be. And yes, brother, sister, by the power of the Spirit that lives within you, they can be brought into captivity to the obedience of Christ. Of course, in a materialist age where libertarianism and libertinism and antinomianism have become so prevalent and violently defended in the public square, it's common to hear someone object. Even some Christians might say, I don't want my thoughts to be captive to anybody. I want my thoughts to be captive to. I want to be in charge of my thoughts. I don't want my thoughts to be captive to Jesus, they might say. I want my thoughts to be free. I'm a free thinker. Free, right? Free thinker. It's a term we hear a lot. This is wrong on at least 2 points. First, you belong to someone, and ultimately, you either serve Jesus or you serve Satan. There's no in between. Secondly, if you're a Christian, you're purchased. You are a possession, a purchased possession of Jesus Christ. You belong to him. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 19 and 20 say, or do you not know that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit, who is in you, whom you have from God, and you are not your own, because you were bought at a price. Therefore, glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's. But when they measure themselves by one another and compare themselves with one another, they're confused. The scripture says they're without understanding. This means two things. It says, first, it means that you're making yourself the measure of others. Secondly, it means you're making others the measure of yourself, right? Suddenly, the standard is whatever the world is. Verse 17 says, let the one who boasts, boast in the Lord. For it is not the one who commends himself who is approved, but the one whom the Lord commends. So to wrap it up, folks, our testimony in the public square, how must we act today with evil waxing all around? Our task never changes, and our duty is not complicated. There are 3 things that the church must do now to receive God's grace. The first one is humble ourselves. This might not be the message that most people are expecting to hear. Is this the pep talk? Is this the rah-rah message? Yes, it is. The first thing we have to do as the people of God is humble ourselves. Jonathan Edwards said, pride was the first sin that ever was. Pride is the most difficult sin to root out. It's the most hidden, secret, and deceitful of all lusts. It's often insensibly creeps into the mind of religion, and sometimes under the disguise of humility. Unquote. How about that? Pride creeps in under a disguise of humility. So the first thing we as the church need to do is humble ourselves. You're not going to be any good out there at all unless you take every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. Humble yourself. Number 2, things we need to do, we must do. Secondly, repent. We are no good. We help no one. We make no cases unless we first see our own sin. We need to repent of our sin so that we can bear fruit for Christ's kingdom. You can't bear fruit when you're caught up in pride. So we must humble ourselves. And you can't bear fruit while you're in sin and while you have unconfessed sin. So we need to humble ourselves and we need to repent of our sins. And number 3, the number 3 thing that we as the church need to do, we have to make use. This is what James Coates said. These 3 points are from James Coates. And this third one here really stuck out. We need to make diligent use of the means of grace. That means action. That means not just action, but action under spiritual discipline. Right? If you get aggravated because you see the drag shows in town, you don't do anybody any good. If you go shooting your mouth off, or worse, spiritual discipline Action under spiritual discipline. So we need to humble ourselves. We can't bear fruit unless we're humble. We need to repent of sin so that we can bear fruit for Christ's kingdom. And we need to make diligent use of the grace that God has poured out into our lives, the common grace that He's given everyone on the planet. But specifically the special grace that is given to those who belong to Him. Right? A special grace that we have to read and comprehend the Scriptures. Right judgment is quick to believe innocence. It is slow and careful before pronouncing guilt. Right? Can you look at Naomi Dix there, that drag queen? And in the flesh, you're probably not going to be, it's not going to be easy to be quick to believe innocence. It's not going to be easy to be slow and careful before pronouncing guilt. The correct lens for a Christian to use when investigating the actions or even the ministries of other Christians who profess to be operating in the name of Christ for the good of His church, or when we're investigating anything, is to see himself as one who sins far more than he has sinned against. That's an act of being humble. To see yourself as one who sins far more than you're sinned against. The Christian approach to discernment is to be charitable, to limit our judgments to only the things that we can clearly perceive, to make no speculations, and then to handle it with thoughtfulness in the spirit of unity and to not create schisms and divisions. Matthew chapter 7 says, do not judge so that you will not be judged. There's the big one, right? Judge not, lest you be judged. Well, yes. Do not judge so that you will not be judged. The verse continues. For in the way you judge, it will be judged. You will be judged. It will be judged back to you. And by your standard of measure, it will be measured to you. In everything, therefore, treat people in the same way you want them to treat you. For this is the law and the prophets. That means that this is the great commandment. This is the whole counsel of God. Treat people the way you want to be treated. 1 Timothy chapter 1. The goal of our instruction is love from a pure heart, a good conscience, and a sincere and unhypocritical faith. Because some people have strayed from these things and have turned aside to fruitless discussions, wanting to be teachers of the law, even though they do not understand either what they're saying or the matters about which they make confident assertions. And Titus 3, verse 10, we have to avoid foolish controversies. Low-hanging fruit. And so when we understand the world that we live in today, here's an example for you. Scientist, I think he's astrophysicist, physicist at least, Sean Carroll. He's very well known, especially in the atheist community who like to debate and make claims against Christianity. He says categories such as male and female are human inventions, stories we tell because it helps us make sense of our world. Folks, that is an example of Romans chapter 1, where we see people, where naturally we suppress the truth about God in unrighteousness. And although God's common grace, through His common grace, we can achieve many great things, can come to extensive knowledge about the universe even, but we can never reason to that ultimate truth. What philosophers have been seeking for the ages now is a unified field of knowledge to bring the unseen realm and the realm of nature together in one understanding. That's the Christian worldview. That's what the Reformation brought back for us, was bringing back the scriptures to the common man, brought back and gave that unified field of knowledge to the people. But there are still many who reject it. And in doing so, you can see Sean Carroll, a brilliant man who really seems to believe that the categories of male and female are just human inventions, stories we tell because it helps us make sense of our world. He says the basic stuff of reality is quantum wave function, or a collection of particles and forces. Whatever the fundamental stuff turns out to be, everything else is just an overlay. How does he live his life that way? Does he live his life as though everything's just an overlay, or does he live his life as a man? Is it just an overlay when someone comes up and steals his wallet? Of course. Early in the 17th century, out of France, Germany, Great Britain, emerged a revolutionary, rebellious period known as the Age of Reason, or the Enlightenment, a response to the religious, philosophical, political ideals of previous generations. It spanned nearly 150 years. The Age of Reason generally began with the ideas of René Descartes and came to a head in the late 18th century with the French Revolution. It was an intellectual movement that had a profound impact on Western culture. We can see the results of it here today. In particular, the fields of philosophy, science, and politics were forever changed. Also changed were well known. These ideas known as libertinism or sexual debauchery. The ideas about these things were changed. They are now, if it feels good, do it. Indulgence in pleasure is the goal of life. As a Christian in any generation and under all circumstances, the Lord's command for how we live our lives is crystal clear. It's not up for debate. We must respond to the culture. We don't bend to it. As Calvin Robinson said in that clip the other day, he said, the church doesn't need to change. You don't come into the church to change the church. We don't bring the seeker in so that we can conform the church around him. We bring the seeker in so that Christ can change him. We don't change Jesus. Jesus changes us. There are two commands that Christ has given us, two commands that encompass the whole counsel of God. The first is this: you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no other commandment greater than these. We share the world with unbelievers under God's common grace and kindness, and as we fulfill the Great Commission and obey the greatest commandments, we are to love them in truth. The church of the living God is a pillar and buttress of the truth. Great indeed, we confess, is the mystery of godliness, says the Apostle Paul. That mystery of godliness is this: He, Christ, was manifested in the flesh, vindicated by the Spirit, seen by angels, proclaimed among the nations, believed on in the world, and taken up in glory. 1 Timothy 3. So it's extremely important to understand what people believe, because every person has a belief system or convictions. Things that they believe are truly true. Right? These drag queens are not out there doing what they're doing because they think it's false. They think it's true. They think their ideas, that their worldview is somehow true. Every person acts on their convictions. What a person believes to be true will control his behavior. So if a person's conduct is not aligned with truth, he's bound to deviate onto a bad course of conduct. Christian virtues are important. We must be obedient to develop those virtues in our lives. But it cannot be done apart from a right knowledge of truth, eternal truth, that is. Lindley Roberts said it is impossible to grow the flowers of grace and love without the soil of truth. Fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is insight. Friends, our message to these lost souls is that truth cannot be exchanged for a better truth. God's truth cannot be exchanged for a better truth. Only a counterfeit. Man was made to love and serve God. The biblical doctrine of man, as God made us, as sin has marred us, and as God graciously remakes us through Christ, that is the foundation of a proper understanding of who we are and who we are not. And it is absolutely necessary. It is a brick in the foundation of a true worldview that is absolutely necessary. And that is where you start with the gospel. We have to help people to understand what their true nature is. That's the leading edge of the entire Christian message. Created in God's image, man has distorted it by his sin. This doctrine is so important because once you share this truth with the unbeliever, it unmasks all the false attempts to solve or avoid our most obvious sin problem. It's the first step in the message of how the Christian gospel alone provides the forgiveness and true freedom, substance of life, and personal meaning that every human heart needs. Fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is insight. For by me your days will be multiplied, and years will be added to your life. The woman called Folly is loud. She is seductive and knows nothing. She sits at the door of her house. She takes a seat on the highest places of the town, calling to those who pass by, saying, "Whoever is simple, let him enter here." So this is what the people we need to reach. This is what they've done. They've followed and fallen for folly. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, "Tell me what a man believes, and I'll tell you what he'll do next." So it's extremely important to understand what people believe. So to make a study of the issues of our day in order that we might magnify the Lord in the public square, we must begin with an accurate anthropology, a true understanding of man's fallen nature in Adam. The unchanging, eternal truth of Scripture revealed from self-existent, the holy Creator God that's where we find the answer. After that, then we can make a useful study of philosophy and history to discern our own culture and to know how to speak to these people in their own thought forms, as Paul spoke to the men and women of Athens. We have a responsibility to act when we encounter members of the LGBT community. Whenever they're persecuted as Christians, we have a responsibility to act. Just the same as we have a responsibility to act when we see anyone persecuted, young, white males included. Jesus said to love your neighbor. It doesn't matter what our neighbor's opinion is on moral or sexual ethics, the command applies. Loving those in the LGBTQ community means in part that we do not condone acts of persecution against them or any behavior that brings harm to them. We can see this in Jesus' parable of the the Good Samaritan, which speaks about a Jew who had experienced severe persecution in the form of being beaten and robbed. Rather than ignoring him, as others had done walking by him, the Samaritan generously tends to the man's wounds and cares for him. And he expects nothing in return, which is an important lesson. For Christians, we do these good things, we do honorable things, expecting nothing in return. Because our reward is eternity, folks. But Jesus tells this parable to a lawyer, a devout and well-studied Jew who was likely a Pharisee. To the Jews of Jesus' day, Samaritans were unclean, despised, despicable people. Samaritans literally were half-breeds by race, and they were heretics in religion. They were avoided at all costs. Look at that from John chapter 4. And Samaritans returned those sentiments to the Jews. As far as Samaritan in this parable goes, all he knew, the Jew he rescued might well have just cursed him or insulted him or killed him the day before. The man lying beaten and bloody in the ditch would have expected no help from the Samaritan, separated as they were, socially, politically, and religiously. The Samaritan had every reason to think the Jewish man hated him. Yet he showed love. And Jesus explicitly said that we are to go and do likewise, as he recounts this in Luke 10. Just doing mere charity is not the point. It is charity even to those with whom we vehemently disagree. It is charity done to those who even we might see taking advantage of the youngest among us. Jesus' message in the parable of the Good Samaritan is that when someone is hurting, our responsibility as followers of Christ is to pour out love, compassion, and healing, relief, and resources to aid him. When members of that community or any other are hurting, our responsibility is to give help and comfort. Agreement or disagreement in religion, in morals, or opinions is irrelevant when it comes to someone who is in a time of need. A lost soul is in a time of need. Whether or not sin is involved isn't the point. When it comes to an actual persecution, even as we ourselves are being persecuted, we still pour out that love because Christ told us to expect it. Our being persecuted is no excuse to not respond in love. It's our duty. It's our command. It's who we are. Now, we in no way condone such sin. We do not ally with them. We do not co-sign their sin because that is not loving. But Jesus rescued an adulterous woman from the persecution of a mob without condoning her sin. To show compassion is not the same as endorsing a person's lifestyle. Compassion doesn't require agreement or approval. Our response to persecution against anyone and any community should involve prayer, a rebuke of the persecutors, and a charitable action. We're to love and overcome evil with good. Romans 12:21. We have a clear mandate from our Lord, just as the Good Samaritan came to the aid, bound up the wounds of a social and religious antagonist. We're also to love our neighbors, whoever they are. For the Christian, there's only one proper response. When anyone is suffering persecution, we should come along beside them. Show them mercy, as we should be showing one another always, and demonstrate the love of Christ. Luke chapter 6, verses 35 and 36. Love your enemies, do good to them, and lend to them without expecting anything back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High. because he is kind to the ungrateful and wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. So more than ever, we have a responsibility to share the only power that can bring peace and give meaning to anyone's life. That is the gospel of grace. The Apostle Paul said, and we too ought to affirm, I am not ashamed of the gospel, because it is the power of God to salvation for all who believe. LGBT advocates war against marriage and traditional gender roles because it declares the image of God plainly. That's why they war against it. And so we need to declare Christian marriage loudly and boldly. And the way we do that is by preaching the gospel. Many Christians know that something is wrong. They know that something is not right in the world, and specifically the homosexual agenda. But because of the scarcity of teaching on this subject in the church, and because the media and social media, almost every American institution, are flooding our environment with propaganda, it's crucial that we understand what we're up against. And that's why we want to help you understand what are the thought forms of the people that we're dealing with. And even though we're going to be persecuted hard, this is our call to stand for Christ now. 1 Corinthians 15, Apostle Paul writes, Now I would remind you, brothers, of the gospel I preached to you, which you received, in which you stand, and by which you are being saved. If you hold fast to the word I preached to you, unless you believed in vain. For I delivered to you as of first importance what I also received. And here's that gospel, that Christ died for our sins in accordance with the Scriptures, and that he was buried, and that he was raised on the third day in accordance with the Scriptures, and that he appeared to Cephas, and to the 12. Then he appeared to more than 500 brothers at one time, most of whom were still alive, though some have fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James and to all the apostles. Last of all, as to one untimely born, he also appeared to me. For I am the least of the apostles, unworthy to be called an apostle, because I persecuted the church of God. But by the grace of God, I am what I am. And his grace toward me was not in vain. On the contrary, I worked harder than any of them, though it was not I, but the grace of God that is with me. Whether then it was I or they, so we preach, and so you believe. God bless you, my friend.
Well, that's a rather interesting position coming from a man on a crusade against the evils of technology.
I'm not against technology, Doctor. I'm against the men who deify it at the expense of human truth.
Armor of Truth, live.
In the age of technocracy, scientism, and pop atheism,
faith is resistance.
Nietzsche, of course, announced the death of God and called for the birth of the Übermensch, the Superman, who would take humanity to new heights and to create a new world order.
Find us at the Armor of Truth YouTube channel and log on. armoroftruth.net.